to Learning from Leaders, a podcast where we sit down with executives to uncover their leadership journeys, insights, and the lessons that drive success.
Good morning, Michael.
Hey.
Thank you for making time this morning to record the Learning Through Leaders podcast. Hopefully this morning we should be having an engaging conversation around your journey through leadership, what you've learned about what makes an effective leader through your various businesses that you've worked in. And so I'll get straight into it and do a brief introduction. Michael joined Bibendum as a part of their founding team back in 82. Selling the business in 2016 and interestingly rejoining the business in 2018. So has seen businesses through the whole life cycle from startup to change in ownership structure. And most recently has joined Coterie Holdings, a super disruptive premium wine business. So tell me a little bit about what you're up to now, Michael, and the vision for Coterie.
So, thank you for asking. Coterie is quite a new business. So the holding company was only formed last year. I was asked to join back in the spring of 2023 and actually started my work in January. We have quite an ambitious plan to look at how we can improve the surface area that we operate in the premium wine space. So we've got 4 businesses currently, Paul. We've got Lane Wheeler, which is a private client fine wine business that was that's celebrating its 170th birthday this year. So we have a big sort of event to celebrate that later in the year. And it's very well known. So if you go into sort of Bordeaux Bug and you say Lane Weaver, they really know it. We have a brand new business called Coterie Vaults, which is a purpose-built fine wine storage business out in Ipswich. It's enormous, this thing. And there are lots of fine wine storage facilities in the UK, as you know, but nothing on this scale, or we believe, that's as beautifully built for premium wine storage, and that's filling up very fast. And we'll look to roll that out. We have a slightly unique business which is called Jarrah Wine. Jarrah Wine is a wine lending business, so that we will take wine as collateral and lend against it, like people do for art, for vintage cars, for all sorts of other assets, but nobody's really done it for wine before, and that's going off like a train, which is really interesting and quite fun for me to work with because I've never been in that sort of environment before. And then we acquired a brilliant business in December called Hallgarten and Novum Wines, which is a 90-plus-year-old agent distributor in the UK, in the top 4, and one that we're delighted to have in our portfolio. And it's going like the clappers.
It's a super interesting ecosystem that you've built from
that word, ecosystem. Yes, and I think that's exactly the idea, and I claim no credit for it. I work with colleagues on the board who have formed a plan. I'm now working with them to execute that, and it is exactly that ecosystem where we have lots of touch points for premium wine. If I may take a small tangent, I'll give you an example of that. We work with a lovely hotel group. We do all their wines, and through our team, Hallgarten team, I was introduced to one of the owners. One of the owners has a very large collection of wine. They wanted to liquidate some of that, so we can actually do that for them. In order to do that, we have to put the wine in our storage. So there are ways that the companies are starting to knit together for the greater good, and that's exactly what I'm there to try and get done.
With the 4 decades that you've spent in the industry, and the wisdom that's generated, and knowledge and network and so on, how have you consolidated all of that into how you've built out your teams and how you're leading your teams through this journey? Because there's 4 very distinct businesses there. And actually, with the acquisition, you've got different cultures that you're integrating. So what's been your approach then to consolidating those 4 businesses into one culture? How have you led people through that journey?
So the simple answer is we haven't. Okay. And that's quite a deliberate answer. We see that the businesses, they all sit under Coterie. They need to learn to work together, but they're all individual businesses. So we're not going to try and clash the cultures together. So the culture in Lane Wheeler will inevitably have slightly different nuances to the culture within Hallgarten. They have a different leadership team. And what we need them to do is learn to work together. So we feel that I feel the best way for a business to thrive is having its own DNA, to have its own culture, to have its own magnetism that the teams buy into, that's certainly right for the front-facing sales team, supplier team. There are obviously some economies that we can get in areas where we can make more efficiencies by joint purchasing, by looking at functions that support the businesses that we can really bring together.
And I suppose then that's the benefits of a shared service function, like retaining the core and the DNA and the culture of individual business units.
Exactly. I've seen before in my recent journey when businesses, when owning companies trying to clash businesses together, it doesn't always end up the way you want it to. In fact, it can probably do more damage than meets the eye. So I'm very sensitive to two things. One is achieving the goals that we're setting as Coterie, but also taking everybody on the journey with us. There are obviously some people who don't want to come on the journey, and the inevitable then happens. But if we get people on the journey where they're motivated, they really believe in the end objective, it's really exciting to see.
I think you've been quoted in the press recently a number of times about re-engaging with employees that you've worked with through your previous career. And you and I have spoken a number of times about that shorthand as a leader that you develop with your top team. And it looks as though in some respects you've leveraged that network, those relationships of bringing some very key players back into the team. So I won't get into all of the contrite terms and getting the band back together and all of that piece. But what I would like to understand is, how have you got to a point where you develop that shorthand with your top team? What is the process that you've been through? Of course, it's years, it's trust and so on. But how do you approach building a team that is as tightly knit as your colleagues seem to be?
So I think there are two answers to that question. One is, and this is said quite knowingly, Coterie is on quite a speed, and I need to be on quite a speed. I was not as young as I was in 1982, so I want to get things done quite quickly. During the development of the team that you're referring to, I think one of the things that someone in a leadership position needs to have is total awareness of what you can do, and therefore by definition what you can't do. Yeah. And can't's probably the wrong word. What I think one has to understand is the things you're really good at, and then by definition, the things you're probably less good at, or there are other people who are much better at it. So I long ago understood that I've got a certain skill set. So I've been fortunate to build connectivity with people I have learnt to trust, learnt to leave to do their job in a way that I can't. We share a goal. We understand what we want to do with the business, but then I'm a big delegator and I don't interfere, and I totally trust. And I totally trust until such time as people let me down. And if that ever happens, and it hasn't happened for quite some time, there is no coming back. It's a one-way street. And so I think there has been some slightly superficial analysis of me bringing a team back together again. What people fail to realize is it takes years to build that trust. It takes years to understand how to work together. And it's allowed me to bring into Coterie people I know are really good. There'll be other people out there who are really good, but they don't know me and I don't know them. So we don't have to learn how to work together. And it allows me to get on and do my thing, knowing that the jobs that need to be done are being done brilliantly by excellent people. And that's cool.
Yeah, totally. And when we had a brief coffee this morning before we came to do the podcast,
you overheard something, didn't you?
I heard a phone call which I think beautifully summarised your leadership mantra, which was, we've set a vision collectively. I want you to develop the vision to the roadmap that delivers the detail against that vision, and crack on and execute. And I thought in a soundbite that's a case study in leadership, really, and effective delegation.
Well, in case you think it's deliberate, it wasn't. It was just a nice thing that I needed to get done today. But I think there is. I've seen businesses, been involved in businesses when it's, in my opinion, too top down, too much transmit and not enough receive. And I think that there are very few people who are brilliant at everything. And whoever you are out there, if you think you're brilliant at everything, I congratulate you, but I'm sure as hell not one of those people. So I think by having delegation really at the heart of what you do, having trust really with the people that you're working with, means that it's much better for them, because it means they don't have an interfering person like me putting my nose in when I'm not a subject matter expert. What we do need to do is make sure we understand exactly where we're trying to get to and why. And that's what my job is to knit these people together into a high-performing team.
That's interesting, of setting a clear vision and then knitting the team together. So that makes a ton of sense. And how has that mantra had to flex and change in different types of organisations? Because you've led a charity as chairman of the Drinks Trust. You were the chair of the Wine and Spirits Trade Association. You've worked for PLCs. You've worked for private equity and venture capital-backed businesses. And all of those things come with different nuances. So how have you navigated that? And how has that impacted on your leadership style?
Probably very badly would be my answer. I don't know, really. I have a certain style, and I suppose I've arrived at that style with a degree of accident. So Drinks Trust was quite interesting. I took it on willingly because I feel that it's important to give something back to this great industry I've been privileged to work in.
True.
You're a trustee now, so I pass the mantle to you to take it to the next level. I think that it was a bit of a mess when I stepped in, and I wasn't aware of that. So that gave me a bit of a shock. And luckily, I had the confidence to change things at speed. Some of the team, the name, and try and modernize it for my successors then to build, which I believe they've done. The Wine and Spirits Trade Association was very different. I served on the board for many years before I became chair. It has a really excellent chief exec, Miles Beale, who I don't know whether he'll hear this, but I think he's excellent and was great to work with. My terror was that he'd leave during my tenure, because then he knows that very well. But the board there was really good. We had some of the top people in the industry, so we had really interesting debates, and Miles leads a very capable team, and I tell you what, right now, leading to the budget next week, we sure need them on their game. So that's the sort of not-for-profit stuff. In terms of answering a question about other, it was quite difficult to move from me being one of the owners of Bibendum, leading it with a board that really supported me, to its sale, which is great. I did that, for the shareholders, is absolutely the right thing to do, and with the benefit of hindsight, perfect timing before Brexit. We weren't to know that. Then I had to warrant to stay, and it wasn't an easy journey. Suddenly working with people with different backgrounds, different experiences, and I'm not saying they're any worse than I am. It's just different when you work in that environment, and I found it quite a challenge, actually, to get my view that in our sector, and it is the wine sector, the premium wine sector is all I've done, is relationships really matter. And I think there are some people in business who have, for whatever reason, haven't had the need to understand how relationships properly matter. And that's the battle I found quite difficult.
Yeah, I think that's fair, because over the years you and I have bumped into each other at trade shows all over the world, and we'll often introduce people to each other that already know both the others, and all over the world. And I think that it's a global industry, and that industry is knitted together by relationships, and that's the core.
As I said to the chair of Coterie, who's a great man, Chris Robinson, I said to him, one of my lasting assets is my address book, and that's back to suppliers and through to customers. But working for a PLC from the inside did introduce a very different drumbeat. The regular reporting, you have to do the regular market updates. It stresses a business in a way that's very different to being in the independent sector.
Yeah. And how did your leadership style change in terms of the downward piece to your team? Because I've always thought one of the key skills of a leader is being a buffer. And then managing that message and dealing with the pressure that's coming down, be that private owners or PLC with shareholder pressure. But how did you have to flex and change your style in that environment?
Well, with Conviviality, I sort of didn't really, because they took me. I was taken off management immediately, which I thought was a blessing. It became rather challenging. Then when I left sooner than I was expecting, and when CNC asked me to come back in, as the chief exec was a lovely man named Stephen Glancy, and we agreed that I'd come back in and run it like a private business within the realms of CNC. So I had a pretty free ability to run the business as I did before, albeit with different ownership. So luckily most of my old team was still there. I brought back in a couple of other people, and we had 3 years of unbelievable fun getting this business firing again. It really was, I would say, one of the really exciting times of my career, because, I came back in. I remember when I'd agreed with Stephen to come back. He said, "When are you going to start?" And I said, "When do you want me?" He said, "Well, I think tomorrow would be a good idea." So I came back into Primrose Hill, and there was a groan from some who knew me, and there was quite a cheer from others who knew me, and there were a few people who were new who didn't know me at all, and they were like, "What's coming now?" And we immediately stood on top of the desk and sort of started shouting at people with a big grin on my face, and suddenly people realised that it was going to be fun again, which it hadn't been, and people's heads had dropped. They were very depressed. They'd just gone through a difficult process with Conviviality, going to the wall. So I really enjoyed that sort of, right, let's stand up and deliver. And I borrowed some a specific tool off a business person I'd long admired, and I plagiarized his idea unashamedly, and it really worked.
I was going to ask you that, actually, around leaders that you admire, the leaders that you've worked with through your career. I mean, if a question I've been asked a few times through my career is, if you could have a glass of wine, a cocktail, a beer with a leader through history, who would that be and why? Well,
I would say it'd be more than a glass of wine, because at least people are generally quite. So I suppose that, I suppose the person, there's sort of four people that spring to mind immediately on that question, Paul. One is the person I was just referring to is someone you'll all no doubt be familiar with, called Charles Wilson, who did an amazing job creating the Booker we know today. And I was privileged to see him, I don't know, once a year, twice a year, because for some reason he was happy to give me some time in his diary. But he had a way of communicating to his team and to suppliers in a way that really landed wherever you were in the business. And so that's what I borrowed from him. I came up with 4 words, told all the team at Bibendum, these are the 4 words I want you to remember, and I want you individually to decide how you're going to interpret those words into your everyday work. And I used to pace around the office saying, "Right, Paul, what do you tell me, how are you translating those words?" And people loved it. To begin with, they were a bit nervous, but so he was one, and gosh, so smart. I thought his analysis of the situation, his understanding of my little business was just awe-inspiring every time I sat down with him. So that was one. Then there's a person I always think of as being someone who really helped me at very difficult times as we were growing Bibendum. And luckily I saw her the other day. It's Dame Karen Jones. And in the sort of 90s, we had some pretty close scrapes with, the dividing line between success and failure in an entrepreneurial business is not that wide. And there were times I was beginning to doubt the path we were on. And so she was kind enough to spend every so often half an hour with me, keeping me on track, keeping me focused on the real ambition of the business, because it's tempting when things are difficult to wander off your chosen path. And so she was someone who had a big influence in teaching me to really keep the faith. So that's 2. Then there was a man I briefly worked for in Bordeaux, who I would say is just, he sadly passed away a few years ago, Anthony Barton at Châtelet Barton. And he had a style with his team and with his customers that taught me a lot. It was so relaxed. It was so fun. It was so filled with joy and humor that I was like, this is serious business, but he's making everybody laugh. He's making everybody enjoy this communication, this interaction. I was like, wow, business doesn't have to be serious. It doesn't have to be tough. So I learned a lot from him. He was a raconteur beyond belief. I couldn't possibly echo his amazing ability with stories. And then lastly, I was privileged to work for a lady in my teenage years, in my equestrian career, actually.
Okay.
A lady named Claire Tomlinson, who sadly also died quite recently. And she taught me how to be competitive, how never to give up, how to face into real pressure and survive.
Right.
So she gave me a competitive edge. I don't think, it may have been later within me, who knows, but she taught me how to stare into adversity and come out the other side. And I think every leader needs to do that because it's a pretty lonely job at times.
Yeah. Thank you for being so honest and candid, and having known you for probably 10 years or so now. I think that you can see that authenticity that came out around making.
Don't believe everything you hear.
Yeah, but the energy point is a serious one, though, because you seem so fired up at the moment about what you're doing with Coterie Holdings and coming back in with a really visionary and disruptive way of working. And from your four mentors and the key things they taught you about process and vision, about tenacity, about making business fun, how have you tried to go about mentoring your team to pay that thinking forwards?
Well, I think they would not see themselves as mentors. So it wasn't a formal thing. It's just me looking back going, who really did I pick things up from? Who really influenced my career? So I think mentorship is a very formal way of looking at it. And I suppose I echo that with the people that work around me. I used the word fun just now. I have long subscribed to my view that if people are having fun, and I'm not talking about in the pod, jokes, but actually if they're really enjoying their work, they're much more likely to be effective. So having a relationship with the team that is fun, that they see as interesting, personal to the appropriate degree, obviously, I think is way underestimated by people. And I think part of that is really empowering people to inject their own character into their roles so that, people are people, right? If you want people to be automated, then obviously there are more and more tools coming. I was on doing some AI work yesterday and I was like, wow, this is just way beyond my knowledge zone. But if you allow people to put their personality into their work, they're much more likely to enjoy it. They're much more likely to work harder. They're much more likely to succeed faster. So I really like people bringing their character into the business world.
There's two or three super interesting points there around how you engage employees from getting them to be themselves. We're all trading in an environment where that's becoming all the more important with diversity agendas and so on, which is totally right. You also raise an interesting point around harnessing AI in business and what that does to culture. And it's how we integrate the creativity and relationships and add the human element with how we all drive efficiency through AI and process.
Yeah, and I listen. I'm probably the worst person to describe this. I can hardly switch on my mobile phone. But what I have got is people around me who really know this stuff and really will understand how to help me adapt our working practices to harness technology so that our people can do what people are there to do: personalize it, relationship, putting real thought into how we can develop our business. And I think that's going to be a great luxury for all of us. Actually, I'm not, there are people who are frightened by progress, frightened by the fact that, things are happening very quickly. I was like, the demonstration I had this week, I was like, wow, this is just so cool. And I think my job is to help people try and embrace that rather than be frightened of it, and make their jobs better, because we all have to do stuff. I'm sure even you, Paul, now you're incredibly successful. You have to do some things that you don't really want to do. So if you can find other ways of doing that enhances your daily work, Wouldn't that be great?
Totally. We've been through similar processes of looking at tech and AI and had similar challenges with the team. The research team being nervous of, is AI going to take my job? But my points weren't as eloquently put as you just have, but it's about freeing people up so that they can focus on the strategy, the fact on the relationships.
Exactly.
Interesting. That was strategic, Goff. Well, I didn't intentionally segue us there, but by Nick, I'm pleased. So I'm certainly no radio presenter, but because I think there's a lot of chat in leadership circles, in business circles, about how you align a people strategy to a business strategy, how you align a vision to a business strategy. And I think all of that, is important. There's, W.H. Smith's and Waterstones are full of books on these topics, but it is, what's the human element of it? And what's your view of the role a leader plays in developing and disseminating a strategy?
Well, strategy, I think, is up to the board. It's not just a leader. I think it's important for the leader to set out a vision, make sure the board is on with that. And then, to me, it's about communication. But, I don't think it's critical that everybody in an organization knows everything. What they need to understand is where is the business trying to go and why?
Yeah. What
is the purpose? What are the values? And then getting everyone aligned to that. And you often get people coming to you say, I don't understand the strategy, and I often think that's a very overused word within a workforce population. And so my answer can often be this, rather simplistic, like the strategy is to make some money, the strategy is to grow. And they look at me slightly cross and I go, okay, what are you doing on both those two things?
Yeah.
And you tell me that's your strategy then. And then it's up to their line managers to put more flesh around that. Obviously, I'm being slightly trite, but doing so quite deliberately to get to have people really think that they're there to deliver something on behalf of the business, and the business is not there to deliver something on behalf of them.
I think that's perfect. I mean, I've always loved that age-old quote of JFK, visiting NASA.
Exactly, we all,
asking the guy who's sweeping up, what's your job, and he very instantly responded, I'm sending a man to the moon.
I always wonder if that's true or not. It's such a used on that one.
It's a bit cliche, doesn't it? And whether it's true
doesn't matter. It's good. It works.
It's the sort of emotive sentiment behind it, isn't it? Of if you've got piercing clarity of an organisation of where you're going, do you need a 500-page?
Well, I'm sure some people do, but I'm a terrible simpleton, so I need things in a digestible format.
Makes sense, and I suppose we're getting into how you engage with teams, how you have clarity of thought of where you're going to, and how that resonates with everyone within an organisation. And I think that differs from different age groups. There's a lot of materials and research on how you engage millennials, how you engage Gen Z, how the workplace is changing. I mean, what have you seen, and what have been your learnings on how you engage with levels of people, how you engage with your organisation across different levels, and the whole age piece of Gen Z and millennials coming through?
Well, let me give you a specific example. Okay. I think it's the easiest thing to do. So we acquired Horgarth and Noble Miners in December. Always been a brilliant business. And I think the management team, who are great, who are still there, I hasten to add, would agree that their previous shareholders wanted it run in a very quiet, very steady way. Okay. I don't want that. We are going foot flat to the floor, and I was very clear with the senior management team before we acquired the business that would be, and they went, yeah, that's great. And then I was invited to pretty much the first week when they were in our ownership to their big annual get together, and I stood up and I said, right, this is the vision for the business to support the current management team, and there was people nodding away, and I think that was taken as words. So people heard it, they didn't really believe it, in my view. And it's only after a certain number of months, when people see the evidence of the change, they see the evidence of a enhanced culture, I would say, that they begin to go, oh my God, this is really different. Now, most people, certainly the ones who talk to me, are going, this is incredible, this is fun, we're really going places. And I'm sure there's some people who are slightly more reticent or don't talk to me who think the opposite. But, there's only one way we're going. So if it's a real problem for the people who don't want this new journey, I understand that. I don't criticize that. But then, there's got to be some decisions made, because we are going to push this business really, really quickly. So I think there's what I'm trying to say, I suppose, is I think you have to do it, show it visibly, not just talk it. You have to demonstrate by one's own actions. And I'm out in the market furiously, as you know.
Yeah.
And I think the team there understood, wow, he really, he does walk it, not just talk it. And I like to do that anyway. I've always done that. So, it's just my way. But I think there are people now that, I have regular calls with a lot of them to really make sure that's clearly understood. And so as part of to back that up, I think accessibility is really, really important. So I think the expression nowadays is C-suite. It's not one I particularly like, but it's probably one in your world you use a bit. I think it's really important to be accessible to anybody who wants to pick up your phone. So my phone number is everywhere. My email address is everywhere. If anybody wants to contact me, obviously I support their management team, because I don't know how many people reporting to me. I don't want to do anything but support the management of all the individual businesses, but people need to feel there's accessibility. So you do that reactively, so people can call me, or proactively. I have regular sessions with people, so I go out to Ipswich, talk to people. I have meetings set up where we have this, which I used to do a lot before, right? 10, 12, 15 people to sit in a room with no agenda, and if they don't have any questions or thoughts, I'll talk to them for a while, and then that generally provokes some questions and thoughts, and then you really get into it. So I think being very visible, being very there is critical to humanize the whole thing.
I think that, thank you. That's an amazing summary. And I like how you ended that with humanizing it, because I think businesses can become too hierarchical with a view to driving efficiencies. And then people are removed from the team. They're a figurehead. And they may try and codify a culture through values and through mission statements and vision statements. And there's a place for that. But I don't think that should ever supersede accessibility and relationships and being there. And I liked your point of not always having an agenda.
So if I was being slightly naughty, which I will be, I think that some of the assets you've just described are forced rather than embraced. So I have seen firsthand in my recent journey, and I prefer not to go into the details, that a lot of these things were done high up in the environment. Yeah, this is going to be our culture. This is how we do the things. I didn't see many of the team coming on that journey. I just thought they looked at it and went, oh, tick. This is something for the annual report, tick. And so I sort of obviously passed it to Space, because I was one of the team, and obviously tried to do everything in my power to promote it. But I just felt it wasn't genuine. And what I love about Hallgarten, I just did a presentation to a business yesterday, and I hope we win it. I'd be really upset if we don't. Anyway, and I'm not going to tell you which it is, but I'll tell you when we got it. We talked about the Hallgarten values. Oh my God. Okay. You could tell I was just one of those. There were 3 members of the Hallgarten team, and supported by me, because I knew some of the protagonists on the customer side. They really echoed all the values of Hallgarten, the eco standards, the whole way we approach investors and people, the whole way that we run our business, support our customers. It just seeped out of them. So their words were being listened to, but actually you could see the body language that they truly believed in. That's when culture really shows itself. And all of them, and one of the points they made, which I thought was really interesting, is they'd each been there for more than 15 years. So it was just part of their personal DNA. And you could just tell it was really, really fascinating to watch how the audience we were selling to, of which there were 5 or 6, really got that. I didn't have, my normal way is to try and underline the points at the end of every paragraph. I didn't need to, because it was just there.
A lived and breathed culture.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's important. So, yes, you said there are lots of textbooks at airports. All of them are right. I've read a number of them. Many of them, in my opinion, and you've read them all, I'm sure, much more deeply than I have, given your work. I think they're variations of a theme. And none of them are wrong, but it's just not the what, it's the how that matters to me.
And I think that I think the role of a leader is how you bridge academic thinking into real world examples. And that's a fantastic one. I spend a lot of time with clients looking at values and vision and mission, which is great as an academic exercise, but it's the what, it's the why, it's the why should people care and what does it mean to them? And that's the bit so many businesses get wrong, where, you can print your values on a poster, on a mouse mat, not that we have mouse mats anymore. That was probably the 1990s, is there? But, it doesn't need to be a piece of marketing material. It needs to be something that people live, believe, and most importantly, care about. Yeah. And I think that it sounds as though the whole Garden team really get it.
It's unbelievable. And I claim no credit. It was all there. What I've tried to do since getting there is amplify it. Amplify internally, so have more confidence, and certainly amplify externally, so people realize how good that business is. But actually, just to build on what you just said, I think there's one more phrase that I use quite a lot. It's only got 2 words in it, and that's so what.
Yeah.
And I think everything's got to pass the so what test.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about commercially. So what culturally? So what strategically? So what results? And people get very, some of my old colleagues now almost say so what before I do. It's sort of become this sort of mantra, because I think everything's got to have a reason. If it hasn't got a reason, why are you doing it?
I think it's also about how you engage people and make messages resonate. It doesn't matter whether that's a pitch, as you were in with the Hall Garden team. No doubt at the end of it, you were thinking, how do we land this emotive message so that the buyer and the buying group think, oh, the so what, they get the so what. That's what matters to them. That's the hook. That's the emotion. And I think so many businesses get that wrong.
Well, I think there are 2 builds there. One is the point I made to the hopeful customers that we get is the emotional side of our relationships really important, as well as the commercial side. So do they want to work with us as people or not? Hopefully, obviously, it's the former. And the second part is, do we really align our values? Because then you're going to have a stickier relationship between you and the customer. So I really like people expressing themselves, was what I said earlier. So I encourage the team to say, this is who I am, this is who Michael is, this is who Paul is. And that you have to give people the confidence to express themselves in that way.
And I think that takes time, doesn't it, for a team to be comfortable, or an individual to be comfortable in their own skin, to be more authentic. Because I certainly know through my own leadership journey that what got me where I wanted to be in my 20s isn't what got me where I needed to be in my 30s. And I'm beginning to realise what I now need to do in my 40s. And we've all got a version of...
We've stopped there, please, because I don't want to come.
And I think also the work that you've done in terms of the Wine and Spirits Trade Trust with Miles, with the Drinks Trust, and obviously some of the non-exec and advisory stuff that you've been doing with WineFi most recently. We through our life, we mature, we become more self-aware, to one of your earlier points. And I think that changes and shapes who we are as a leader. And I wanted to ask you, if you don't mind, around, if you could go back in time and give Michael in his 20s, in his 30s, in his 40s, we'll stop there. And you've joking. So under some advice. What do you think? What do you wish you knew back then that would have made your learning and leadership journey easier?
Well, I sit here answering that question feeling a bit of a fraud, actually, because I don't know that I did that much sort of deliberately. I think I learned as I went along, because I was very fortunate to land in a position with a business that turned out to be quite successful quite early. So I was sales director, I was barely out of nappies. And so you learn as you go along. I think if I go back now, I think you have to have modesty is one of the key things that I would go back. I wouldn't say I'd like to think I wasn't very arrogant then, but you do believe you can do everything. And so it took me a while to find a way through into what I described earlier of having people around you support the areas you're less good in, and you have to learn to really amplify the things that you are good at or you believe you're good at. So I think modesty. Then there's the trust piece, and that comes forged through some difficult fires. I mean, the journey has been quite long. Therefore, I've seen 3 or 4 recessions. Growing a business is quite low margin. We got near to the edge several times. And so out of that, you learn an enormous amount. You learn an enormous amount about business. You learn an enormous amount about yourself because you internalize a lot of worry, and you don't want to worry your close family. So you have to learn to deal with that. I said earlier that, running a business can be quite lonely. It is quite lonely, especially when it's not going very well, because you can't communicate that to your staff. And if you do, you have to be very judicious how you do that. And I certainly did in the global financial crisis. I might come back to that, actually. You can't really talk to your customers about it. You certainly can't talk to your suppliers about it. So it's really, really something that you have to learn to deal with yourself. And that can be quite scary.
You've nicely segued us into a topic that I wanted to cover, which is really around resilience, because I think arguably that is one of the key skills of a leader. It's dealing with ambiguity. It's dealing with pressure and stress and resilience. And we all have different ways of managing that. You and I have talked about your earlier equestrian career and horse riding in nature and getting out in the countryside and stuff was a grounding mechanism. And how have you built that muscle memory and resilience? And are there any words of wisdom or advice you would share with other people in our industry of perhaps routines, patterns, rhythms that you found useful to build resilience as a leader? Because it's tough at the top and it's lonely at the top when you can't share those things. So there's about 20 questions in there. Unfortunately, that wasn't very clear, was it? But
no, I get it. I get the thrust of what you're trying to ask. So I think the answer is, and I probably wouldn't recommend this, but my way of dealing with it, and my eldest sister, who is a therapist, who always laughs about this, I seem to have a capability of putting certain things into a locked metal box and throwing it to the back of my mind, and only unpicking it again when it needs to be. And I think you have to somehow learn to separate your business life from your personal life. Otherwise it can get, and it's really hard to do. I mean, very easy for me to say I'm absolutely hopeless at it. So even at my wedding, which was quite soon, 32 years ago, my best man said, if you cut Michael's wrist, you'll bleed Bibendum, not blood, which made everybody laugh, and it still quoted at me quite a lot. My wife, certainly, I'm working too hard, brings that back all the time.
Okay.
So I'm giving you words here, but I haven't necessarily been very successful at that. So the advice I would give is just keep saying, and often what I do is I write the problems on a bit of paper, and get them out there, and then often just put the piece of paper away till the next day, and it's amazing how many those problems go away.
Totally.
And so that's how I do it, and as nobody can read my handwriting apart from me, it's quite a certainly quite confidential as well. Well, it doesn't really matter. There aren't many. It's just I think it's getting it out in a way that suits you.
Yeah, I think that's good advice, because I think something else I wanted to touch on, or a topic I at least wanted to lean us towards, is authenticity and being a very authentic leader, because from our interactions over the last decade or so, I think that you have that in spades. You're very consistent, you're very authentic, and I suppose that's why you bring so much energy to the businesses that you get involved in. So how did you, through your earlier career, get to an authentic version of yourself, or was that always there?
Well, I think I'm too stupid to do it any other way, because I think that quite simply, unless you say it as it is, you'll probably forget what you've said before, so you'll be inconsistent.
Yeah.
So I like being an open book. I don't like complicated things. I try and say it as it is, even if it's not very digestible at the time. And I think people learn to digest that. And I'm not saying that everybody who's worked with me is like my style, and those who haven't, great. I think that most people, have. I'm really proud of the industry. I look around, and it's amazing how many people have come through the sort of my journey in the trade, and I see them all over the place. And that takes me back to some years ago. We gave a party to celebrate Bibendum's 25th or 30th, I can't remember which, and we invited everybody there who we could find who'd ever worked for us.
Okay.
And it was startling and very humbling how many people came to me and said, those days at Bibendum, be they long or short, were the best days of my working career. And I found that I woke up the next day feeling incredibly proud of that, because it meant that we touched people in a way that go beyond just the work they were doing. And I that was a really proud moment for me.
It's amazing, and that's it's not a validation, but it demonstrates the work that we do leaves a footprint, and really seriously leaves a footprint in how we shape and guide the people that we work with and the people that work for us through the rest of their career. It's full stuff.
And I think, without wanting to get into the details of this, latterly I've worked with people who don't necessarily understand the business, don't necessarily understand the people, and they sit in a boardroom, sit in their office and create policy, create plan without knowing the details. And I found that startlingly poor behavior. And not for, they're nice people, I know, but it was sort of, I think what you said earlier is sort of textbook management. From a textbook, not textbook good. And, I sort of used, rather obviously, I use an example of I'm a football nut and I'm not a Man City supporter, but I'm a huge supporter of their manager. Yeah. Pep Guardiola has an ability to get great players, make them even better, but importantly, makes them perform brilliantly as a team. And if you can get 11 people playing much better than the sum of their parts, wow. It's obviously, it doesn't mean he wins everything, because you can't win everything. And I use that example as sort of, serial winner, but not serial winner of everything. And I think that's sort of, I think one's job is to bring the best out in people. And often you do that by tinkering on the tiller a little bit, but then letting them go express themselves.
Totally. Yeah, and I think arguably that's the role of a leader, isn't it? To set that vision and to mould and shape a team through encouragement, through guidance, through mentoring, to be the best that they can be, with the value of the whole being greater than the sum of its parts.
Exactly. And that's the Coterie vision, actually. So the reason we've got lots of different pillars is to make the whole better with all these ingredient parts. So that's quite interesting as we set out on quite an accelerated path to the various businesses that we have now. You and I just both come back from Asia. That's quite interesting because I was only there for 2 weeks. So I don't profess to be an expert at all, but what I found is the enthusiasm, the can-do attitude, the want-to-do attitude.
Yeah.
Really refreshing against I woke up at weird hours because of the sleep deprivation, reading the UK newspapers, lying in my bed. I was like, oh God, so depressing. So I think if one can harness all these things to make the business better, that's exciting.
And I think you nicely segue us into another point I wanted to touch on briefly, which is the international nature of our industry, because to lead through different cultures takes a different set of skills. There are not many top-tier producers anywhere in the world that you've not worked with and don't have relationships with. And I think there's a lot of cultural nuance there with how you work with the Americans, how you work with South Africans. You've obviously got a very good network of producers anywhere. And that's interesting as a leadership challenge of how do you unpick the cultural nuances to build relationships with complex teams across countries? It's arguably the thing I find most interesting about our industry, the global nature.
Yeah, I haven't yet run a business outside the UK. I hope to be on the Coterie journey within the months, years ahead. In terms of working with the producers, I think often the way that we've chosen to do it, and again, I'm very lucky to have a great team. Andrew Shaw's come back into the Coterie world. He and I worked together for 10 years. I think you've described, the word you've used earlier is authentic. I think people have got to understand you as a person. So I'm very lucky. I've traveled the world extensively to producers. You generally end up becoming friends with them. So I've stayed in their houses. I've certainly drunk many good bottles with most of them, shared meals with them, often know their children as we've all got older. So I think it becomes a proper relationship. And I would suggest that's right by the fact that a number of my old friends are coming back into them or joining the Coterie world, specifically through Hallgarten. And I find that terribly rewarding because they see that this is a personal relationship. It's more than business. Most of the people we work with are family companies, multi-generational family companies. And I find it extraordinarily humbling how people value relationships. And I value relationships, and to see this happening, the contacts I'm getting, Andrew's getting, and others are getting, is really it's very humbling, actually.
Yeah. And that's based on decades of being authentic, having integrity, doing good business, the underpinnings of what makes.
But it's not just good business. There have been times when it's been crap business, but you have to have the ability to go to Paul and say, Paul, it hasn't worked.
Yeah.
And this is why, and this is what we're doing about it.
Totally.
And so having the wherewithal to say it as it is in a collegiate way, not in an aggressive way. And I think that I see people try to use aggression in business, and I think it's very misplaced, because I think wherever you are in a negotiation, either way, supplier or customer, if it's collegiate and people have a way to make it work for all parties, it's going to last.
Okay.
If it's aggressive, it probably won't, because people say one thing in the room, they'll leave the room and go, this is nonsense.
Yeah. Totally, and then you end up burning relationships and transactional ways of working, and there's just no longevity. So I couldn't agree more. And I just wanted us to take a little bit back to Coterie Holdings. We talked a lot about Whole Garden. In 5 years' time, hopefully, when we're having a glass of something good in 5 years' time,
so it's going to be very good.
Happy to first growth bull it is then, Paul. Somewhere good, hopefully.
Yeah.
But what is your vision for the business? You outlined that at the beginning of the call. Yeah. What do you want your legacy to be? So
it's not about me at all. Let me be completely clear.
Yeah.
I was kindly asked by the Coterie board to join. I'm taking on a vision that was developed before my arrival. I hope I'm adding to that as we go along. So it's nothing to do with me. I feel incredibly privileged at this stage of my career that I've been given this opportunity. And as I said to you over tea earlier, I'm having the time of my life. I can't quite remember, and I know there would have been times when it's been as much fun. It's incredibly hard work. It's incredibly challenging. I've learned how to deal with stress now, so I'm not there. That's not a real issue. So where do we want to get to? We want to have an unfair share of the premium wine market, and we want to go at pace. And I'd like to think that all my senior colleagues would echo that. So when you talk strategy, that is the strategy, is
the unfair share of the
unfair share. But we want to harness it with technology. So I'm not someone who's very good at technology. I'm pretty good at some other stuff, but we have a determination to be market leading in technology, because we believe that in the wine space it hasn't always developed as hard and fast as it should have done. We want to show that leadership. We want to take our business forward. So I'll give you an example. You just mentioned Wineify. So Coterie's taken a minority stake in Wineify, a small stake, and Callum, who's the founder, kindly asked me to join his board. And he did say, Michael, we really need to learn from you. He's 29. He's got a clear vision about how he wants to disrupt the wine investment. And for those of you who are interested in wine investment, do follow Callum on Wineify on LinkedIn. It's amazing what he's doing. Yeah. And I laughingly say to him, we talk most days, I'm learning far more from him than he is from me. I mean, let me make no mistake about it. He's looking at it through very different lens. He's looking at it in a very ambitious, slightly financial driven way. It's fascinating. So to me, to be involved in a situation where I'm learning so much so quickly, I'm absolutely loving it. So I think you'll see, this is a very long-winded answer to your question, by the way. I think you'll see Coterie in 5 years having a really interesting group of businesses that really have learnt to interact with each other in a way that makes each of them better, that really have a purpose to give great customer service using the most up-to-date technology in a way that enhances our customers' experience, enhances our suppliers' experiences. And if we can achieve that, it's going to be pretty awe-inspiring, actually. And that's what I find really interesting. My wife thinks I've gone mad because I'm suddenly bouncing out of bed at 5:30 on my computer by sort of 5:45, and she sort of comes out an hour later going, what on earth are you doing? And my answer often is, I'm having fun. So she goes like, oh, well, that's all right then. And then she occasionally says to me, well, weren't you meant to be winding down at this time of your life? And my answer is, I've never said that to you. That's her thoughts, not mine. But I think she's finding it quite fun. I use that word advisedly. She's finding it quite fun to have somebody who's really motivated and really, really excited about every day. And that's if I can. And I think that would go for, we had a board meeting and a management meeting this week, and the adrenaline in the room is palpable. It's not to say everything's going perfectly. It's not, but we have a very clear view on where we want to get to, how quickly we want to get there, and it's done with a real spirit of collegiateness. So, i.e., it's not in a way that I found recently in other circumstances where people finger point, going, "It's your fault" or "It's your fault." And what I'm trying to foster with Chris, who's our chairman, is this is an us game. So if something's not right, what are we going to do about it? And then we understand who's going to do the component parts of that. And it's, you heard me talk to one of my team who's worked for me for a long time, James Scott, who's seriously bright, and he's heading up all our data work, and he's from what I'm led to believe by James and others, is in order to really harness modern technology, you have to really harness the data, and he's making leaps and bounds already in a few months. It's really exciting to see. So we were on a shared journey, and it's I think the sky's the limit, frankly.
Yeah. Thank you for such an involved answer, and the way you bookended that of, it's not about me as a leader, it's about the team, it's about the role that you play with no ego, the role that you play of giving everyone a platform, giving James a platform to succeed on data, and being there to help mentor, steer and guide. That's a pleasure.
Well, I don't think I really mentor. They don't need mentoring, actually. I'm there to help them. I'm there to unblock stuff. But I'm really clear. This is I want Coterie to be the hero. I happen to be the face of it, because that's one of the tasks I was given, because Coterie needed to elevate its the awareness of it, which is obviously what I do, because I know people to help us do that, because it's important that we get people with a broad understanding of what we're trying to do. And why? Because we want to be friends of the business. And I'll give you an example. Jera Wine, which was founded by my colleague Lily, Jera is there to support the industry. We thought that wine lending would just be for high net worths. It's not. We're finding ways that we can provide liquidity to businesses. Obviously, that has to be the appropriate security, helping them, when they need that. And I find that fascinating again.
And super disruptive. I remember when you first told me about this on a call, and the ability for a non-trade player to unlock working capital from asset that sat in the cellar beneath their venue, particularly when we are trading in reasonably brutal economic times. I mean, that is an incredibly powerful tool for the trade.
Yeah, I'll give you an example, which is really nice. So there was at the Hallgarden tasting last year, annual tasting. You must come to the annual tasting next January. Paul, I was introduced to this restaurateur who had a fabulous collection of wines, and we were just chatting about it because they, my sales colleague wanted me to meet them, and this person said to me, "Well, the sadness is that I have to sell some of my collection I've spent years building, because I've got a new venue. I need some working capital to refurbish it." And I was like, "Well, why do you need to sell it?" And he said, "Well, I need the money." I said, "Well, there's another way of doing it." So he's like, "What?" And I took him through the Jera journey. And actually, we didn't end up doing the deal, but he could not believe the fact that he'd have to put his wine in store, that's obviously, that we would allow him to feed off that as he needed it for his great restaurant wine lists, but he could borrow against it without it affecting his bank liability. And that's where I love the company starting to come together.
And the emotive connection that he built to his collection that he spent decades.
Yeah, it's exactly like spot on.
Yeah,
spot on.
Brilliant.
So we didn't do the deal in that case, annoyingly. But Holgar, because the fact somebody saw we were we're still a business. Lily's running a business with Jera, but we were sort of extended the hand of friendship, and Hallgarden had done very well in the more conventional supply terms, and I'm very proud of that.
What an amazing journey that you've got ahead with Coterie, and you can clearly see your passion for it. So, thank you so much for making time today to share your thoughts. And anything else that you would like to add that we've not covered on the topic of leadership?
Well, I as I said, I feel a bit of a fraud, actually. I've done it in the best way I can, and I think that I've used the word fun quite a lot. I couldn't exist unless I was enjoying myself. So I think if a leader is not showing that they're enjoying themselves, by actions and body language, as much as by words, it's very apparent to everybody. And I think that I need to be able to tell people what the journey is. I don't expect everybody necessarily, I hope they will, that necessarily to agree with that journey, but that's a choice we have as human beings.
Totally. Yeah. And that's authenticity, isn't it? Of leaving.
It's what it is.
Yeah. Good man. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so much for sharing the insights that you have, and look forward to speaking again soon.
Well, I'm very grateful for you listening and asking some interesting questions. I hope I've done them some justice. I fear I haven't, but anyway, you're kind to ask me. Thank you, Paul.
That was all. Thanks so much for your time.